passion, focus, discipline. This is the Zero Excuses podcast. Each and every week, we talk to high-performing, inspirational athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders. We ask powerful questions to extract their tools, strategies, and life lessons for you to crush your excuses, to break out of your comfort zone, and accomplish your ambitious dreams and goals. Here's your host, Kenyon Zitzka.
All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Excited to have you here. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been with me from the beginning, I appreciate you listening no matter what. So we've got a great guest lined up for you guys. We have my good friend Kyle Rapp joining us. He is the co-host with his friend Aaron Combs of the Strength in Mind podcast, where they talk about how it's important to have both a strong mental and physical condition so that you can stay at the peak of your performance, which I totally resonate with. I personally have found that not only concentrating on my physical strength, but also my mental strength and resilience, they go hand in hand, and they kind of build each other up. So I definitely jive with their mission and their topics that they talk about on their podcast. So I'm excited to dig into that with Kyle today. But before we get into all that with Kyle, have a couple quick reminders. First, encourage you to head over to iTunes, kenyonzitzka.com/iTunes, take you right to the Zero Excuses iTunes homepage, where you can leave a rating and review, and also subscribe and share this podcast with friends, family members, and coworkers. And lastly, one of my missions here in 2019 is to connect and impact with as many people as possible. And I'm doing that by offering a free 30-minute strategy session with anybody who wants to explore the topics and the strategies and everything that we talk about here on the podcast. Encourage you to reach out to me and book one of these calls with me. You can do that by scheduling a time on my calendar at kenyonzitzka.com/call, CALL. And it'll take you right to my calendar, and you can find a mutually convenient time for us to connect. And like I said, have a conversation about whatever you want to talk about, whatever you might be struggling with, or if you simply want to get to know me a little bit better and kind of pick my brain on my experiences, happy to do that as well. Anyways, so look forward to hearing from as many people as possible, and that's all I've got. Let's get into the conversation with Kyle. Kyle, I know we've been connected for quite a while, but finally able to get our schedules lined up to have you on the Zero Excuses podcast. Really excited to talk to you.
Hey, Kenyon, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really glad to be able to do this with you finally, yeah.
Yeah, so you are the co-host of the Strength in Mind podcast with your good friend Aaron Combs, and I'm really excited to dive into the mindset that goes around achieving an elite level of fitness. And, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is getting your mindset in place so that you can consistently execute on your fitness and health goals. So before we get into all that, why don't you, give yourself a little more of a detailed introduction for us? Let us know, who you are and why you are so passionate about what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm 28 years old. I live in Bowling Green, Ohio currently, and not enjoying the winter right now, but it is what it is. So I'm a second-year master's student at Bowling Green State University, studying kinesiology with a specialization in sports psychology. And when I graduated in undergrad here at Bowling Green, I was a sport management major, so it was more the business side of it. And I had gone through a couple majors my freshman and sophomore year, from pre-vet, pre-dentistry to physical therapy, and really couldn't nail down something I was really quote-unquote passionate about. So I just decided, let's go with sport management now. I'll figure it out later. Minored in psychology. And I didn't want to be like everyone else that was graduating with me, doing like Cleveland Cavaliers ticket sales. So I applied to a number of private golf clubs because I played golf since I was 2. And that's really where my sport passion started. And my dad got me into golf really early on in life, and that's something we share. but I applied to a few private golf clubs, like I mentioned, in Montana, New York, Chicago, and then another one in New York. And I had the one in Chicago and said, yes, I'm coming. And then I had the interview on Long Island, and I was really impressed with them. And they had the potential to have a full-time employment afterwards. So I unfortunately had to tell Chicago I was not coming, and they were let down, which I kind of felt bad, but I needed to do what was best for me because Chicago was not allowing me to work for them full time after the internship was done. So I moved out to Long Island after living in Columbus and Bowling Green for all of my life, actually. So I only knew the Midwest. Moved out to Long Island and loved it, and hope to be back on the coast here soon. But what I really learned there was the 1% mindset and the way they lived. And yes, I saw them at their quote unquote leisure time, but you can still see what makes these, hedge fund managers, these 1% titans. You can see what makes them special and the work ethic that they have and the stories you get to hear. I spent 3 years on Long Island, was a beverage manager there the last year. And that was the biggest takeaway, was to immerse myself with these people. And I walked away knowing that I wanted to be one of those people one day. And I knew now what it took to be in that category. I moved back to Columbus and applied to grad schools. I did not get in any of the three that I applied for, and that was probably the darkest point of my life so far, and hopefully it will be the darkest point. It felt like a failure, and it was a letdown because it was like this was the road I was supposed to be on. Right. And then you get denied, and it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? So I'm 26 years old, living in my parents' house, bartending part-time, and I'm sitting by the pool after a workout one day, and I don't want to listen to music that day. So I click on this little purple icon called podcasting, and I type in sports psychology because I'm still interested in the field, and I come across a name that you and I are connected with in Nii Shovo. So started listening to his content, and he reignited that fire that I had for mindset and sports psychology and that arena. So to make this really long story short, I applied to work for him for an internship, was able to work with him one-on-one for 6 months, became a paid employee of his, and we worked together for 2 years. And, we don't have enough time to say what I've learned in that time. Mm-hmm. And I'm super grateful for that time. But right now, my focus is finishing up my thesis for my master's and growing my own business and lifestyle consulting.
Awesome, man. So yeah, I'm, at the core of what you and I talk about, I think, is the fact that everything starts in our minds. Like, you can't expect to get the results that you want in your life and have a negative mindset and be, downplay everybody else's success and whatnot. You have to turn inward towards yourself first and improve, that thing between your ears before you have any hope of you're remotely getting close to where you want to be in life. So I definitely, connect with you in that realm. So with your podcast, you're kind of focused down on the mindset around strength. Am I understanding that right?
So what Aaron and I complement each other really well in is he is a certified strength and conditioning specialist.
Yep.
He has his CSCS, and he works at Redline Athletic, which is a youth sport elite complex. So he's teaching youth how to become stronger injury prevention, and that's really his purpose in life.
Yeah.
And mine is more sports psychology, entrepreneurship, and that side. So we complement each other really well. And it's not like he's overtly more research oriented than I am. I just take a more practical standpoint.
Right.
We complement each other really well, and we want to bring our perspectives to athletes and anyone helping athletes to say this is the right way to go about it.
Right. So I want to back up to what you mentioned about the 1% mindset and being around those 1%ers. And if you hear things repeated on this podcast, it's for good reason. And you're definitely a product of your environment. You're a product of who you surround yourself with. And how have you carried that forward? Obviously, you surround yourself with someone like me, like I've done. Who else are you finding complements where you want to be, like people who are way out ahead of you? Are you stretching yourself in that direction? How are you able to reach people like that when you're fairly unknown at this point?
Right. I'll tell you, it's a struggle living in Bowling Green, Ohio, especially when you work by yourself most of the time. And you're going to grad school with people who are pursuing their purpose, and I get that, but they've never been out in the real world yet. They haven't seen what I've seen. So to connect to people that are a few miles ahead of me is so important, and I've been able to do that through kind of my podcasting company, that portion of it. So one of the podcasts I run is called the Flow State of Mind podcast, and the hosts are Aaron Diamond and Jordan Duggar, and they've been so influential in teaching me the correct way to go about being a fitness coach and how to grow your social media marketing, how to storyboard, how to be authentic in your delivery. And I was able to be a part of Aaron's last Impact Fitness Coaching Academy group, which is a 13-week immersive experience into learning every aspect you need to know about how to become an online coach, from sales to marketing to setting up the back end of everything. So that was incredibly invaluable to me, and I've been able to connect to guests that they brought on through the mastermind that they're in. You and I are connected, so that connection's been invaluable to me as well. So it's just getting out of the area in which you're in, and everyone has something to contribute, and you're only going to grow if you get out of the pot that you're currently in, as it were, to use a analogy.
Yeah, that's been I have a very, very similar experience. Like, the podcast is almost an excuse to connect with some of these influential people as well. So it's not necessarily trading money for these influencers' time. It's providing them something of value, and the podcast has definitely been a platform through which you and I have been able to do that. But sounds like from your perspective, you've been able to provide other values such as podcast editing, putting together websites and all sorts of other stuff. So if you're listening, if you guys are listening out there, take some notes on this, because it doesn't have to be an exchange of money. It could be exchange of services. It could be an exchange of intellectual property, perhaps. So think outside the box here, and if you're trying to reach influential people, trying to stretch your power circle, as I call it, that's a great way to do it. But let's start getting into kind of the mindset piece. That's something both you and I are a bit passionate about. So if you're talking to someone who is kind of green, this is kind of a new concept of like being self-aware, being conscious of our thought patterns and whatnot. Where do you, if someone were to approach you and say, hey, teach me about this stuff, where would you start?
So I would start, and we did an episode on this. It's episode 3. We call it the Elite Athlete's Mindset. And we break it down by this acronym. So it is BEARR. So it's bear with another R. So the beliefs that you have are going to dictate the emotions that you feel. The emotions then lead to the actions that you take. Actions will lead to your results. And the second R is your quote unquote perceived reality.
Yeah.
And that is so important to understand, that your perceived reality can be completely different than what it actually is, because it stems from the beliefs you have in yourself. If you don't believe you're going to be able to do something, you're going to have, negative emotions. You're going to come up against resistance, and all of us will. But you're not going to be able to push past that because you don't have that belief in yourself. So you're not going to take the actions, like me getting on this podcast, me starting a podcast, you starting a podcast.
Yep.
And then we are going to interpret our results as, oh, I'm just not good enough. No, if you have that belief in yourself, it elicits the positive emotions, it elicits the actions needed, and then your results will be positive. And it all goes back to, believing in yourself. And that's where the mindset really starts at. And the way to cultivate those beliefs is doing hard things every day. And that's why I like to start off with an intense workout every day, because I get the hard physical thing out of the way. I can accomplish anything after that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an acronym that I definitely, I don't mean to sound like I'm freaking brown nosing with you right now, but like, I know you and I have very similar, belief systems, but like that acronym is, definitely is something that I live by. And, re-engineering your beliefs is something I think is a very critical thing to do when you are setting out on a new venture, something that maybe stretching yourself beyond your comfort zone. Just a quick example, and you've heard me talk about this before on the podcast, and like I said, if you're hearing it over and over again, there's probably a good reason for it. But it's sometimes can be very subtle shifts in your belief systems. Like my subtle shift was like, I'm not a good public speaker. Well, the shift was, I'm not a good public speaker. However, with enough practice, I can be a good public speaker. So it's just, tacking on maybe a subtle change to your current beliefs. And, which kind of leads me to, not a lot of people do that internal work to really like uncover their beliefs and where they come from. How have you been able to do that?
So to go back to what you were saying real quick, I always like to add yet at the end of any sentence that I have that is quote unquote negative.
Yeah.
I'm not a great speaker yet, but I'm going to work on it.
Yeah.
And if you've ever read any book like Game Changers by Dave Asprey or Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss, and they interview hundreds of high performers, and they boil their habits and their mindset and their routines down, they have this growth mindset that in sports psychology we teach as task-oriented. So can you repeat your question? I'm sorry. I want to get that in.
Oh, no worries. No worries. The question was, how do you work with people to start uncovering these beliefs? Because not a lot of people are actually aware that they have this beneath the surface belief system. So how do you start uncovering that with people that you might work with?
That's a great question. So we start off by really getting to know that person. And when you ask great questions, it will start to elicit a response that they may not have been really going to tell you that day. And I think being a great coach is being able to ask great questions and dig to the root cause. And I believe I'm able to do that well. Nee is also great at that. And then we kind of we see if those quote unquote excuses or beliefs have any justification to it, or if they're a narrative that we've made up in our minds. Cognitive behavioral therapy says that this perpetuating loop of these negative beliefs need to be broken. So in CBT, they say there's a thought stop. And an example I could give is, again, back to the public speaking. Well, I'm not a good public speaker. I'm going to, okay, so stop that. Well, why aren't you a good public speaker? Well, because I haven't practiced it. Well, the more you practice, the more you're going to be able to change that I am a good public speaker now
Yeah.
because I've put the time in, I've practiced. So being able to thought stop and say, is there any justification to this thought? And then re-engineering it into kind of a growth mindset thought process.
Yeah.
That's a very, surface level answer to that, but that's where we start.
Yeah. And, one of the practical ways that I implement that is if I find myself, having a limiting thought, as I call it, like, well, who told me that? An example I can give is I was told that I was quiet and shy in my childhood. So like that thought perpetuated through adulthood. Then I finally asked myself, well, who told me that? Like, is that true? Ask yourself, is that actually true?
Right.
It is another great way to do that.
And I want to be brutally honest right now. One limiting belief I'm dealing with right now is I can't be a successful fitness coach without being absolutely shredded and with a six pack. And I know that's a limiting belief, but the people that I follow on Instagram, I see them killing it and I see them having a six pack and absolutely shredded. So I make that association where that's the only way it's possible. And not that I'm not working towards being a shredded physique, but I know I have the coaching ability and to be able to get people results. So that's just a limiting belief that, I'm currently trying to tackle and obliterate.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to burn these things out of our thought patterns. And, if someone out there is listening right now and says this is all hogwash, this sounds like I'm just brainwashing myself, what would you say to them?
I would say pick up the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. It, for hundreds of years when psychology was first being studied, we always thought that IQ was set at an early age. And through her research, we've seen that, new brain cells grow and we can make new neural pathways, and you can get better no matter where you are in life. And it just takes that belief in yourself, and kind of knowing why is so important, I think, because reading and knowing that things have been accomplished by other people, or knowing, well, why does a growth mindset work? And I'm someone who is insanely curious about this sort of things. So for me, knowing exactly why something is, I can now make a habit change to say, okay, I believe this based on what I read by an effective and authoritative source. So I'm going to change my belief and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And you know what, there's so many, like, we've been programmed almost by social pressure, by advertising, by social media, to believe certain things, such as, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, or breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Like all these, like, 20th century beliefs. One of the things I tell people is to question even the most common of beliefs, out there, and don't be afraid. Like there's also a component of fear of rejection or fear of isolation as well. Like we've got that fear. If we go against these commonly held beliefs, we're going to be outcasts. And I look at that as a good thing, because going back to your 1% mindset, you want to be thought of as the weirdo. You want to be thought of the person as crazy if you have these huge goals. And everyone listening to this podcast right now, I assume, is going to have some sort of big goal that they want to accomplish. So I guess my words of advice to kind of put a bow on what we're talking about here is, you've got to be thought of as the weirdo. Like if you want to join a bunch of weirdos, you got to find those, that 1% crowd, whatever it is. And I can't say that enough. It's just, don't be afraid to be that outcast, and you're gonna leave friends and family members behind that do think that you're crazy, and you're gonna outgrow friendships, you're gonna outgrow relationships. So have you had that experience?
Oh, absolutely. Let's go back to that. Start with the weirdo part. I tell part of my cohort I own my own business and I get the weirdest looks.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they don't think they can do it. So why can anyone else our age? So that's more of a pride and significance thing for
Right.
me to say, yeah, I'm able to sustain my own sort of income by working for myself. But it took 11 years working for other people to learn what to do and what not to do.
Right.
So it's not like I just woke up one day and said, I'm going to work for myself, and I had no experience in working. And then secondly, getting next to some other weirdos. Podcasts are a great way to learn who's a quote unquote weirdo or not.
Yeah.
And who's trying to make an impact in the world. And, I have a bunch of shows I listen to, Impact Theory, the Model Health Show, and their interviews are always so great. And I'm able to kind of search out those people. And right now, a lot of my research that's not thesis oriented is into nutrition right now. And Dr. David Perlmutter is the author of Grain Brain, and he's pretty much on this keto and paleo movement that I've been studying for over a year now. And he's able to boil the science down because he's an MD, a neuroscientist. So, but he's able to explain things in a way that make complete sense. And he's someone I trust, and that's just an example of a quote unquote weirdo that just absolutely loves what he's talking about, and he's purpose driven by it, and he's passionate about it too. And just find those people, and then what's great about this day and age is you're able to do that digitally.
Yeah. And that's definitely a book that's on my reading list. And one other aspect of like mindset that people don't understand is taking care of yourself. Like the sleep, the nutrition, the hydration, and even down to your breathing has a huge effect on how your brain operates on a day-to-day basis. What are some basic things that you have optimized in your life to support that mindset?
So as a coach, I teach from 4 pillars. It is exercise, nutrition, sleep, and stress management.
Yep.
And a great book, if we want to start with sleep, is Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson. And Sean is someone I trust very much. And his former clinical practice, he was a strength conditioning coach. He owns his own company now. He's the host of the Model Health Show. For anyone listening, check that show out. And he gives you practical tips and tells you why. So anywhere from blackout curtains to blue light glasses, to melatonin works for some people. It does the opposite effect for me for some reason. But reishi is a mushroom that he suggests that forces sigmatic cells. I've yet to try that, but I want to. And then if we talk about stress management, it is meditation. And if you tell your friends you're meditating, you also get the weirdo looks. But it's sitting in silence and changing the focus of your lens on different things. And Headspace actually has a student rate that's $9 a year. And it's been a game changer for me because I'm able to sit down and I love his voice. And you're able to go through the deep breathing and a body scan to kind of see how you're feeling. And then, the thoughts that are going on in your head. And there's a bunch of science that I don't want to get into right now, the benefits of meditation. But I would say if you want to start doing something that almost every high performer does, it's that. And then when you were talking about self-care, it's taking time out for yourself. And I do that at the beginning of the day. That's my workout. I'll drive to the gym, listening to a podcast, learning more. And then I come home and then I work on the business. But I need that time beforehand to get myself ready to be able to pour into other people. And then I believe evening routines are also very, very important. To have kind of a set, I know what I'm going to do the next day. I plotted it out. Everything's on the charger. Everything's clean. I feel great, and I'm able to
just shut things down.
Exactly. Yeah. Being able to shut things down and go into my normal circadian rhythm and being able to have quality sleep.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't have that quality sleep because they're worried about so many things. Money, relationships, things like that. And meditation helps with that, but having a solid routine will be able to kind of gear you into, okay, it's time to wind down, time to shut down, and time to sleep. So that would be some practical advice.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is like planning my day out so that I'm not like trying to think about that. I'm like, okay, what am I forgetting here? Like, you don't have to worry about that if you write down your plan of the day for the next day. It's down on paper. You don't have to worry about it. Done. Mail it in. Go to sleep. So
exactly.
Yep. Well, Kyle, we're starting to run up against time here. This has been a great discussion here. A lot of resources that I'm going to definitely look into. So I'll try and pack as much of that into the show notes as possible here. But how can people get in touch with you if this is piquing their interest, and how can they check out your podcast?
Yeah, so it is Strength and Mind. So it's just the N podcast. Yep. And my Instagram is Kyle_Rappflex. Once you get me there, you can kind of see all my other social media handles. Please reach out with any questions you have. Facebook and Twitter. I'm on all those, but mainly Instagram.
Instagram's your hub. Got it. So yeah, I think me and you are connected on Instagram, so I'll definitely give you a shout out there as well. So thanks for taking the time to join us today, and love what you're doing.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Zero Excuses podcast. Join the conversation at KenyonZitska.com in our Facebook group. And don't forget to rate and subscribe to our show. We'll talk to you next week. And always remember, results, not excuses.